The first time I saw the arena, my stomach knotted like a tightened noose. The walls rose impossibly high, forged from black stone veined with glowing violet streaks that pulsed like a heartbeat. Above, tier after tier of alien faces stared down, scaled, feathered, chitinous, and slick-skinned. Their roars blended into one monstrous chorus, a sound so loud it seemed to press against my skull. And at the very top, upon her throne carved from bone and obsidian, sat the queen. Her eyes, luminous gold with vertical slits, regarded me not with anger or pity, but with the casual disinterest of a predator watching another meal being prepared. Was dragged forward by two guards whose armor gleamed like oil under the arena lights. Their species was called the Clith, hulking insectoid bipeds with 4 arms and a clicking language like snapping twigs. They released me at the center of the sand, and my knees nearly buckled as the crowd screamed for blood. I was the human, the exotic creature imported from a backwater world they thought had no place among the stars. I was not a warrior, they believed. I was prey. The announcer's voice thundered in a dozen languages, its translation echoing inside my head through a neural implant. Behold, the fragile one, the weakling of Saul. He will face the gladiators of the queen, and his blood shall christen the sands. The words carried venom, but the laughter of the crowd bit deeper. To them, my death was not only certain, it was entertainment. I raised my chin anyway, scanning the massive arena. The smell of iron and scorched stone stung my nose. Weapons hung on racks along the edges, blades shaped like crescents, staffs crackling with plasma, spiked chains glistening with dried gore. But I had nothing, not even armor. Just a torn prison tunic and the stubborn beat of a human heart that refused to quit. The gates rumbled. A shadow stirred behind them. The first challenger emerged. A brute nearly 3 meters tall, reptilian hide armored with jagged scales. His weapon was a hammer that looked like it could crush a starship's hull. The crowd's roar swelled as he stomped forward, each step shaking the ground beneath me. I swallowed hard. The queen leaned forward on her throne, a cruel smile touching her lips. Begin. The hammer swung down with a roar like thunder, and the fight for my survival began. I dove left, rolling across the sand as the hammer slammed into the ground where I had stood. Stone shattered, and fragments sprayed into the air. The crowd howled in delight, their voices like waves crashing against jagged cliffs. My body screamed in protest. Years of military training back on Earth had left me scarred but alive, and it was those scars that carried me now. My opponent lifted the hammer again, its edge sparking with faint energy. I had no weapon, but I had my wits. That was humanity's edge, always. Improvisation. As the reptilian gladiator roared, I scanned the ground and spotted a jagged shard of stone, torn free from the floor by the hammer's impact. I snatched it up, the rough edges biting into my palm. It was no blade, but it was sharp enough. He swung again, this time sideways, the hammer's arc wide and brutal. I ducked low and sprinted under the blow, closing the distance before he could recover. My shard of stone plunged into the thinner scales under his arm, drawing a shriek that silenced the crowd for half a heartbeat. Hot blood sprayed, black and smoking where it touched the sand. I ripped the shard free and rolled clear as his hammer crashed down again. The alien reeled, more stunned by my defiance than the wound. They had expected me to die instantly, crushed and broken, but I had made him bleed. I saw it in the queen's expression. Her smile faltered, curiosity kindling in her eyes. I wasn't prey anymore. I was something unexpected. But the reptilian wasn't finished. Rage boiled in his yellow eyes as he bellowed and charged. His hammer swung in wild arcs, faster now, desperate to crush the fragile human that dared defy him. Each strike came closer, closer, until I felt the wind of the hammer against my skin. My legs burned as I darted back and forth, searching for another opening, and then I saw it, his footing. The sand shifted beneath his weight, his massive body too heavy for quick turns. I feinted left, then sprinted right, the hammer missing me by inches. I darted behind him and drove the stone shard deep into the back of his knee. The scream that followed was guttural, primal, and final. The crowd erupted, half in fury, half in awe. The reptilian collapsed, his hammer slipping from his grasp. I staggered forward, snatched the weapon with both hands, and lifted it high over my head. The weight nearly broke me, but adrenaline carried me through. With one last cry, I brought the hammer down on his skull. Silence fell across the arena. The first gladiator was dead, and I was still standing. Blood dripped from the hammer's edge as I stood panting, my chest heaving. The silence stretched on, fragile as glass, before the arena finally exploded in noise, not cheers, not approval, shock, horror. The idea that I, a human, fragile, and unarmored, had slain one of their chosen gladiators was unthinkable. For them, this wasn't entertainment anymore. It was heresy. The queen's golden eyes burned brighter. She gestured lazily with one clawed hand, and the announcer's voice returned, harsher now. Impossible! Yet the weakling stands. Another challenger enters. The gate rumbled again, and my gut twisted. This time, two figures emerged. They were twins, nearly identical in their alien forms, sleek feline warriors with glimmering silver skin and elongated claws that gleamed under the lights. They moved with terrifying grace, weaving around each other as though their bodies shared the same rhythm. Their armor was light, flexible, and fitted with blades along the forearms. I tightened my grip on the hammer. My arms screamed at the effort. My muscles unaccustomed to the weight, but I would not drop it. Not while the queen watched. Not while the galaxy called my species weak. The twins circled me, their eyes locked, their movements synchronized. They lunged as one, claws slashing. I swung the hammer wide, forcing them to leap back, but they landed on opposite sides of me, perfectly coordinated. One struck high while the other struck low, a pattern too fast for me to track. Their claws tore shallow gashes into my arms and legs, each strike drawing more blood. The crowd cheered again, reassured by the sight of my suffering. But I had learned something in my years on Earth's battlefields. Speed could be turned against itself. I let them press me, their slashes cutting closer, their movements growing, more reckless as blood soaked my tunic. Then, at the last second, I dropped low, planting the hammer's head into the sand. One twin tripped over it, stumbling forward just as the other lunged. Their coordination faltered, and that was all I needed. I wrenched the hammer upward, catching the stumbling twin in the chest. The impact cracked bone and hurled him across the sand. Before the other could recover, I swung again, the weight carrying me through, and struck her across the skull. She collapsed beside her brother, unmoving. The arena fell into uneasy murmurs. 3 gladiators had entered, 3 had fallen. The queen leaned forward now, her smile returning, not of scorn, but of hunger. She was beginning to see me not as prey, but as a weapon. The wounds burned. Blood ran down my arms and legs in hot rivulets, staining the sand beneath my feet. My breath came ragged, every inhale slicing through my ribs like glass. Yet I stood. The hammer rested in my hands, its weight no longer foreign but familiar, as though it belonged there. Around me, the crowd shifted uneasily. Their jeers had grown quieter, replaced by whispers, by glances at the queen. And she looked delighted. With a flick of her claw, the announcer bellowed again, "The human defies death, but the arena is vast and its hunger endless. Release the beast, the D." Gates thundered. The ground trembled. Something far larger than the gladiators stirred within. The roar that followed was like nothing I had ever heard, deep, guttural, a sound that seemed to come from the earth itself. When the beast emerged, the air seemed to shiver around it. It was no warrior. It was a monster, four-legged, with a body like armored stone and a maw lined with jagged teeth. Its eyes burned crimson, locked on me with animal fury. Chains hung from its limbs, snapping taut as handlers drove it forward with electrified prods. The crowd roared again, their fear drowned by the spectacle. This was not a fight. This was an execution. The handlers released it. The beast lunged. I barely rolled aside as its jaws slammed shut where I had stood, the impact shaking the sand. I swung the hammer, striking its flank, but the blow bounced off its armor with a hollow clang. The beast whirled, its tail whipping out, striking me across the chest and hurling me to the ground. Pain erupted through my ribs and the hammer tumbled from my grip. For a moment I lay there, the beast's shadow looming over me, its breath hot and foul against my face. The Queen's voice echoed in my head, cruel and sweet. "This is where you die, human." But I wasn't ready to die. Not here. Not now. My fingers closed around the shard of stone still buried in the sand, and I rose. The beast's jaws snapped shut, teeth grinding sparks off the stone where my head had been an instant before. My shard slashed upward, scraping across the softer flesh beneath its eye. It bellowed, staggering back, blood as dark as tar dripping into the sand. The crowd roared, some in outrage, others in awe, but I didn't hear them anymore. My pulse was a drumbeat in my ears, primal and relentless. The hammer still lay yards away. I sprinted for it, sand spraying under my feet, the beast's roar shaking the walls as it charged. Its claws raked the ground, gouging trenches in stone. I dove, seized the hammer, and rolled just as it struck again, jaws snapping inches from my legs. But this time I was ready. I swung the hammer into its leg joint, the same way I had broken armored mechs in Earth's training yards. Bone and chitin cracked. The beast howled, stumbling as one limb buckled. It thrashed, chains rattling wildly, tail whipping through the air like a storm. One strike caught me across the back, and agony tore through me as I hit the ground, gasping. Still, I rose. The Queen was watching. Her golden eyes gleamed with a hunger that no blood could quench. She leaned forward, claws drumming on the arm of her throne, waiting. Not for my death, I realized, but for what came after. She wanted to see how far I could be pushed. The beast lunged again. I dodged, swung the hammer upward with every ounce of strength I had left, and smashed it into the underside of its jaw. The impact echoed like thunder, its head snapped back, teeth shattering, and for the first time, the monster faltered. The arena fell silent, and then, slowly, impossibly, the beast collapsed. I stood above it, chest heaving, blood dripping from my wounds, the hammer raised in my hands. The silence stretched on until the Queen's voice, low and melodic, cut through the stillness. Interesting. That single word carried across the arena, translated into every tongue present. The crowd murmured nervously, shifting in their seats. For them, this was wrong. No human should have stood against the Queen's gladiators. No human should have slain her beast. But I had. The Queen rose from her throne, her movements graceful, predatory. Her presence silenced even the loudest voices. She gestured, and the arena gates slammed shut. No more challengers emerged. For the first time, I wondered if the games had ended. Her voice rang out again. "Bring him!" Clith guards seized me, dragging me from the sand. My body screamed with every step, but I refused to stumble. The hammer was ripped from my grip, though I saw the hesitation in their insectoid eyes as they touched it, as if it had become something unclean, sacred in its defiance. They dragged me through the tunnels beneath the arena, the roar of the crowd fading into silence. Torches burned along the walls, casting long shadows that twisted across alien carvings. Stories of conquest, battles won, civilizations crushed beneath the Queen's rule. And now, somewhere among those endless victories, my defiance would be written. At last, they threw me into a chamber. Not a cell, at least, not like the others. It was larger, with a table of carved obsidian, a basin of steaming water, even food laid out in gleaming silver bowls. My stomach snarled, but I did not touch it. The door slid open, and she entered. The Queen moved like liquid fire, her dark carapace glinting with streaks of gold, her form tall and elegant, her every step deliberate. She dismissed the guards with a flick of her claw. When her gaze fell upon me, I felt it like the weight of a blade against my throat. "You should be dead," she said, her voice soft, almost amused. "Yet you are not. Tell me, human. Why?" I met her gaze, forcing my voice steady. "Because you underestimate us." Her smile was sharp, dangerous. "Us? My people." She tilted her head, golden eyes narrowing. For a long moment, the chamber was silent. Then she laughed, not cruelly but with genuine delight. "Perhaps I will keep you alive a little longer. Days blurred, or perhaps weeks." Time in the Queen's palace moved like shifting sands, distorted by the weight of her attention. I was no longer a prisoner, but neither was I free. I was tested, studied, questioned. The Queen wanted to know everything, about Earth, about humanity's wars, about our weapons and our weaknesses. I gave her fragments, never the full truth, feeding her curiosity without surrendering my people. And all the while I watched, I listened, I learned. The palace was a fortress, carved from obsidian cliffs that overlooked a sea of molten rivers. The air shimmered with heat, the sky choked by storm clouds that bled violet lightning. Within its halls, alien species moved. Like shadows, envoys, slaves, warriors, all bound to the Queen's will. Some feared her, others worshipped her, but all obeyed, except me. Each day, she summoned me, sometimes to spar against her gladiators, tests designed to break me, to see if my survival was chance or instinct. Sometimes to dine at her table where she studied my mannerisms as if I were both curiosity and threat. She never struck me, never threatened me outright. Her power was absolute, and she knew it. But in her eyes, I saw something unexpected. Respect. It unnerved me more than hatred ever could. One evening, after a brutal match against a cybernetic gladiator that left my ribs fractured, she dismissed her court and approached me. Her claws traced the edge of my broken armor, careful, almost tender. "You adapt," she murmured. "Faster than any species I have seen. Where others break, you bend. Where others falter, you endure." I met her gaze, my voice raw. That's what it means to be human. Her smile returned, sharper this time. Then perhaps humanity is not so weak after all. Word spread across the empire. The human lived. Whispers echoed through the alien courts, carried on the wings of envoys and the hushed tones of traders. Some called me a curiosity, a freak who had survived where he should not. Others spoke of me as a threat, a weapon humanity had forged in secret, and always the Queen watched. But she was not the only one. In the lower tiers of the palace, among the slaves and servants, eyes followed me. A scaled healer who patched my wounds in silence, a feathered messenger who lingered too long when delivering food, even one of the cliff guards, his mandibles clicking strangely when I passed. They did not speak openly, but I recognized it for what it was, hope. They had lived under the Queen's heel for so long they had forgotten what defiance looked like. And now, for the first time, they saw it again, in me. One night, the scaled healer slipped me a message, carved into a shard of bone. The words were simple. "We will follow." I stared at it long into the night. I had come to this world as a prisoner, dragged into the arena to die. Now, somehow, impossibly, I was becoming something more, a symbol. And in the shadow of the Queen's throne, a rebellion began to breathe. The shard of bone weighed heavier than steel in my hand. "We will follow." 3 words, small and fragile, yet they carried more fire than any weapon the Queen's empire had ever forged. I had not asked to lead. I had not come here to inspire rebellion, but humanity had a way of creating sparks in the darkest corners of the galaxy. I hid the message carefully, knowing discovery meant death, not only for me, but for every alien brave enough to believe in something greater. Still, I began to move differently. I spoke more to the healer, asked questions of the messenger, learned the rhythms of the guard's shifts. The Queen saw everything, but even she could not read the silent conversations of the oppressed. My next match in the arena was no simple fight. They sent me against 2 gladiators at once, one a hulking reptilian brute with scales like iron, the other a lithe, 4-armed assassin whose blades shimmered with venom. The Queen's voice echoed across the sands. "Prove you are—" "More than chance, human." The fight was brutal. Their coordination was perfect, their strikes precise. Yet they were predictable. They trusted power, speed, technique. I trusted survival. I broke their rhythm, turned their attacks against one another. When the reptilian roared in triumph, pinning me with his bulk, I drove his claws into the assassin's chest. When she shrieked and lashed out, I used her venom blades to slash his throat. Blood soaked the sand. The crowd screamed for death. The Queen's eyes glittered with hunger. But instead of finishing them, I raised my hammer high and bellowed. Words only humans would understand. "We endure." The sound of my voice carried, foreign yet undeniable. For a moment, silence rippled through the arena. And beneath the roar that followed, I heard it. The faintest whisper from the shadows where slaves watched. "We will follow." Rebellion in a palace like the Queen's could not begin with open war. It began with whispers, with stolen food, with hidden weapons carved from tools. The healer smuggled herbs to ease pain. The messenger carried notes disguised as scraps of refuse. Even the Clith guard who once dragged me to my matches now lingered in corridors, mandibles twitching in patterns that spoke of warnings and safe paths. But time was against us. The Queen was too clever, too sharp. I saw it in the way she studied me during her feasts, how her golden eyes lingered not on my wounds, but on the defiance that refused to die behind them. "You are changing them," she said one night, her tone soft, dangerous. "My people whisper, my servants stir. Tell me, human, do you dream of toppling a queen?" I forced a grin despite the ache in my bones. "Queens fall like anyone else." Her laugh was like blades on stone. "Perhaps, but not before they crush everything you love." Her words haunted me, but humanity's curse and gift was that we never stopped moving forward even when crushed, especially when crushed. The first act came in silence. The assassin I had once defeated returned, not as a rival, but as an ally. She had lived only because I spared her life. Now she offered her blades for my cause. "You fight not for glory," she said, her eyes gleaming in the torchlight. "You fight to live. That is strength." One by one, others came. A slave with wings broken so she could never fly again. A gladiator who had killed 100 for the Queen, yet wept in his sleep. A guard who had seen too many innocents die, and always the whisper, "We will follow." The day of the grand festival arrived. The Queen's arena brimmed with life. Dignitaries from across her empire, warlords draped in gold. ambassadors from conquered worlds. It was a display of dominance, a reminder that no one stood against her, except me. I was dragged into the arena once more, this time armed with nothing but my hands. No hammer, no blade. The queen rose from her throne, her voice ringing clear. Today, the human dies. The crowd howled for blood, but even as they screamed, I saw them, the faces in the shadows, the healer, the messenger, the assassin, the Clith guard with his mandibles trembling in defiance, the gladiator who once broke bones for the queen, now gripping chains in his fists, waiting. The queen raised her claw. A beast emerged, larger than any before, a titan bred for spectacle, with armored plates that shimmered like obsidian fire. Its roar shook the stones beneath my feet. The fight began. I ran, dodging claws the size of swords, the air splitting with every strike. Sand sprayed, bones cracked, the crowd roared. But I wasn't fighting only the beast. I was buying time. With every dodge, with every strike that chipped its armor, the rebellion moved. Slaves unlocked gates. Gladiators turned their chains on guards. The messenger soared once more on wings unbroken, and when I drove my fists into the beast's shattered eye, climbing its skull like a mountain, hammering until bone split and blood poured, when it collapsed with a thunderous crash, the arena itself erupted. Chains snapped, weapons flashed. The queen's court became a battlefield. The palace burned. The rebellion surged like wildfire, slaves and gladiators and even guards turning on the empire that had crushed them for so long. Smoke rose to the skies, violet lightning cracking overhead. The queen's voice cut through the chaos, a scream of rage and fury that shook every heart, and then there she was. The queen stood at the center of the arena, her golden carapace gleaming with firelight, claws dripping with blood. Around her lay the broken bodies of those who had dared to strike first. Her eyes locked on mine. "You," she hissed. "This is your doing." I lifted the hammer, my hammer, reclaimed from the vaults where she had hidden it. Blood ran down. My arms, smoke filled my lungs, but my voice was steady. "No, this is theirs." We clashed. Her strength was monstrous, her claws carving through stone, her speed terrifying. But she fought with arrogance. I fought with desperation, every strike. Of her claws, I turned aside with the hammer. Every blow that shattered my armor, I answered with one of my own. Around us, the rebellion raged, but all fell silent as our duel consumed the arena. At last, battered, bleeding, I feinted left, then drove the hammer upward with everything I had. Left. It struck beneath her chin, snapping her head back, splitting her golden carapace. She staggered, claws flailing, and I roared with a voice that echoed across the galaxy. "Humans, do not break!" The hammer came down one last time. The queen fell. Silence claimed the arena. Then, slowly, the voices rose. Aliens of 100 species, crying out not in fear, but in freedom. Chains fell, blades lowered, hope surged like fire. I stood above the queen's body, bloodied and broken, but unbowed, as the rebellion roared around me. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy looked upon humanity not as prey, not as weak, but as the spark that lit the fire of fear.